I never imagined that Christmas Eve would become the day I finally stood up to my family's years of disrespect. My name is Marie, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the family disappointment, while my younger sister Jessica has been the golden child who could do no wrong. Yesterday afternoon, my mother Linda walked into the kitchen with that familiar smirk plastered across her face and announced that Jessica's 22 college friends would be spending Christmas at our house. She expected me to handle all the cooking, cleaning, and serving, while Jessica enjoyed playing hostess to her wealthy Northwestern University classmates. For 3 years, I've been treated like unpaid household staff in my own childhood home, invisible except when they needed something done. People always assume they know your story based on what they see on the surface, but appearances can be deceiving in ways that would shock most folks. When I moved back into my parents' house 3 years ago, everyone thought I was another college dropout who couldn't make it in the real world. The truth was far more complicated than anyone bothered to discover. I had actually left the University of Michigan during my junior year to launch a software development company with my roommate Sarah. We'd created an innovative data analytics platform that helped small businesses optimize their inventory management systems. For the first 2 years, we struggled financially while living off ramen noodles and coffee, working 18-hour days from a cramped apartment in Ann Arbor. When the pandemic hit in 2020, our client base evaporated overnight as small businesses closed their doors. Sarah decided to cut her losses and return to finish her degree. But I couldn't give up on something I'd poured my entire soul into creating. With no money for rent and mounting debt, I swallowed my pride and moved back to my childhood bedroom in suburban Chicago. My father, Harold, worked as a mid-level insurance adjuster for a regional company, earning a decent but unremarkable living. He'd always dreamed of expanding into commercial policies for major corporations, but lacked the connections to break into that exclusive market. My mother, Linda, had been a stay-at-home mom since Jessica was born, channeling all her unfulfilled ambitions into obsessing over our family's social status within their affluent neighborhood. Jessica, meanwhile, had followed the traditional path they'd always expected from me. She'd maintained perfect grades throughout high school, earned a partial scholarship to Northwestern University's prestigious business school, and was currently finishing her MBA while dating Brandon, whose father owned a chain of luxury car dealerships across Connecticut. During family dinners, the conversation invariably centered around Jessica's academic achievements, her internships at Fortune 500 companies, or Brandon's family connections. When anyone asked about my situation, Linda would quickly change the subject or make vague references to my temporary setback while I helped clear the dishes like hired help. What none of them knew was that I'd been quietly rebuilding my company from my childhood bedroom during those 3 years. I'd learned from my earlier mistakes, refined my software platform, and slowly started acquiring new clients who desperately needed efficient inventory solutions as supply chains became increasingly unpredictable. The irony was that while they saw me as a failure, I'd been conducting conference calls with potential investors from the same room where my high school prom photos still hung on the walls. I'd learned to schedule important business meetings during times when the house was empty, speaking in hushed tones to avoid drawing attention to my activities. That evening, as I sat in my room reviewing the Christmas dinner menu my mother had thrust into my hands, my phone rang with a call that would change everything. The number showed a California area code I didn't recognize, but something prompted me to answer. Marie, this is Thomas Richardson, CEO of Richardson Industries. I hope you have a few minutes to discuss a proposal that could benefit both our companies. My heart nearly stopped beating. Richardson Industries was one of the largest technology conglomerates on the West Coast, known for acquiring promising startups and providing them with the resources to scale globally. I'd submitted my company information to their development team months earlier, but never expected a response, let alone a personal call from their chief executive. The conversation lasted nearly an hour as Thomas explained how impressed his technical team had been with my inventory management platform. He described their plan to integrate my software with their existing e-commerce infrastructure, potentially reaching millions of small business clients worldwide. When he mentioned the acquisition figure of $8 million, I had to sit down on my childhood bed to avoid collapsing. In addition to the purchase price, he was offering me a position as Director of Innovation, overseeing the integration process and leading future product development initiatives. "I'll need your answer by tomorrow evening," Thomas concluded. "We're planning to announce several new acquisitions before the new year, and your company would be a perfect addition to our portfolio." After hanging up, I stared at my phone for several minutes, processing the reality that I was about to become financially independent beyond my wildest dreams. The same family who'd treated me like a domestic servant for 3 years would soon discover that their greatest disappointment had actually achieved more success than any of them had ever imagined possible. That night I barely slept as I contemplated how to handle this incredible opportunity while dealing with the Christmas dinner situation my mother had dumped in my lap. The next morning brought a whirlwind of activity as my mother transformed into her usual pre-party perfectionist mode. She'd already rearranged the living room furniture twice before I'd finished my coffee, muttering complaints about everything from the inadequate lighting to the outdated throw pillows that didn't properly showcase our family's supposed sophistication. "Marie, I need you to drive to 3 different grocery stores today," Linda announced, waving a handwritten list that resembled a small novel. "The organic market downtown has the best selection of heirloom vegetables, but their seafood counter closes at noon. Then you'll need to go to that fancy delicatessen in Winnetka for the imported cheeses and finish at the wine shop near Northwestern to pick up the bottles Jessica already selected." She handed me her credit card with the air of someone bestowing a tremendous favor. "And remember, presentation is everything when you're entertaining guests from Jessica's social circle. These young people come from families with very high standards." I nodded enthusiastically, which seemed to catch her off guard. Usually I responded to her demands with resigned acceptance rather than genuine excitement. "Actually, Mom, I think this dinner party is a brilliant opportunity. Jessica's friends sound like exactly the kind of sophisticated crowd that would appreciate really exceptional hospitality." Linda's eyes brightened at my unexpected cooperation. "I'm so glad you finally understand the importance of making good impressions. Your sister's education has opened doors to connections we could never have accessed otherwise." What she didn't know was that I'd spent the previous evening researching every single one of Jessica's 22 invited guests through social media and university directories. Most came from wealthy East Coast families involved in finance, real estate, or established professional services. But one name had immediately caught my attention: Stephanie Richardson, daughter of Thomas Richardson. The same Thomas Richardson who'd called me the night before to discuss acquiring my company. The same Thomas Richardson whose business empire my father had been desperately trying to connect with for his insurance expansion dreams. The same Thomas Richardson who would be picking up his daughter from our house on Christmas evening. While my mother continued planning seating arrangements and menu modifications, I quietly booked a first-class flight to Miami, departing that afternoon. I'd always wanted to spend Christmas somewhere warm and tropical, and Thomas had mentioned during our phone conversation that he'd be conducting business meetings in South Florida over the holiday weekend. "Would you be available for dinner tomorrow evening if you're in the Miami area?" he'd asked casually near the end of our call. "I'm always interested in meeting face-to-face with entrepreneurs before finalizing major partnerships." I'd accepted the invitation, immediately realizing that this Christmas dinner disaster might actually provide the perfect excuse to pursue the most important business opportunity of my entire career. Jessica arrived home around noon with Brandon in tow, both carrying shopping bags from expensive Michigan Avenue boutiques. Brandon drove a gleaming BMW convertible that he parked prominently in our driveway, clearly intended to impress the neighbors. He wore a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, and spoke with the polished confidence of someone who'd never doubted his place in the world. "Marie, I hope you're planning something really special for tonight," Jessica said, examining her freshly manicured nails. "Stephanie Richardson's father is some kind of major business owner, and Brandon thinks networking with their family could be valuable for his post-graduation opportunities." Brandon nodded importantly. "My dad always says that success comes from surrounding yourself with the right people." Stephanie mentioned that her father owns Richardson Industries, which is apparently this huge technology company. "He might be interested in investing in the car dealership expansion we're planning." I smiled pleasantly while mentally calculating how much money I was about to earn from the very same Richardson Industries they were hoping to impress. "That sounds like an amazing connection. I'm sure tonight will be really memorable for everyone involved." Linda bustled around the kitchen, muttering about centerpiece arrangements and proper wineglass placement. "Harold, make sure you research this Richardson man online so you can have intelligent conversation topics prepared. Marie, once you finish the shopping, I'll need you to start preparing the appetizers and setting up the bar area." My phone buzzed with a text confirmation for my Miami hotel reservation at the Fontainebleau, along with my first-class seat assignment. I'd booked the presidential suite for 3 nights, figuring that if I was about to close an $8 million deal, I might as well celebrate in style. The beautiful irony was that my parents were frantically preparing to impress a man who'd already chosen to make me wealthy beyond their comprehension. While they worried about proper etiquette and conversation topics, I was planning to discuss future business strategies with him over dinner at one of Miami's most exclusive restaurants. That afternoon, I loaded my suitcase with carefully selected outfits suitable for both business meetings and beachside relaxation. I'd learned during my years of building my company that confidence comes from feeling prepared for any situation, whether you're pitching to investors or negotiating acquisition terms. As I watched my mother arrange and rearrange the dining room place settings, I felt a mixture of anticipation and satisfaction building in my chest. Tomorrow evening, they would discover exactly who I really was and what I'd accomplished while they'd been treating me like their personal assistant. The best part was that I wouldn't need to say a word. Thomas Richardson would handle that revelation himself when he arrived to pick up his daughter and learned about our professional relationship. Christmas morning arrived with the familiar sounds of my mother's controlled panic echoing through the house before sunrise. I could hear her rummaging through kitchen cabinets and muttering about missing serving platters while the coffee maker gurgled to life downstairs. Outside my bedroom window, fresh snow covered the suburban streets in pristine white that would normally fill me with holiday warmth. Instead, I felt an electric anticipation as I quietly packed my remaining travel essentials and confirmed my airport transportation. The luxury car service would arrive in exactly 45 minutes, giving me enough time to execute my departure plan without creating unnecessary drama. I'd prepared everything the night before with military precision. Detailed cooking instructions for the prime rib timing schedules for all side dishes, and emergency contact numbers for local restaurants that could provide backup catering were typed neatly and placed prominently on the kitchen counter. My note explaining the sudden business opportunity was tucked underneath the main instruction sheet. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was providing more comprehensive planning assistance while abandoning the project than I'd ever received when taking full responsibility for family events. But I'd learned that sometimes people only appreciate your contributions after experiencing life without them. Linda appeared in my doorway, wearing her silk robe and an expression of barely contained stress. "Marie, I need you to start the appetizer preparations immediately. Stephanie Richardson confirmed that her father will arrive at 6 p.m. sharp to pick her up, and everything needs to be absolutely perfect when he sees our home. Actually, Mom, I have some unexpected news." I gestured toward my packed suitcase with what I hoped appeared to be appropriate regret. "I received an urgent business opportunity last night that requires immediate travel. There's a potential investor meeting that could change everything for my company's future." Her face cycled through several emotions before settling on irritated disbelief. "Marie, this is hardly the time for whatever fantasy business pursuits you've been entertaining. We have 22 sophisticated young adults arriving here in 8 hours, including someone whose family could significantly impact our social and professional connections." I handed her the instruction sheets with genuine sympathy. "I've written out every detail you'll need, including backup plans and emergency contacts. Jessica is incredibly capable, and I'm confident you two can handle this beautifully together." "Handle this together." Linda's voice rose an octave. "Marie, I've never prepared a dinner for more than 6 people in my entire life. Jessica doesn't even know how to operate the oven timer properly." "Then this will be a wonderful opportunity for both of you to develop new skills," I replied cheerfully, pulling my suitcase toward the door. "Besides, wasn't it you who always said that necessity is the mother of invention?" Harold emerged from his bathroom in his weekend flannel shirt, looking confused by the raised voices. "What's happening? Why does Marie have luggage?" "Your daughter has decided to abandon her family responsibilities for some imaginary business meeting," Linda snapped. "Apparently, her pretend company is more important than supporting Jessica's educational and social opportunities." I kissed Harold's cheek affectionately. "I'll be back tomorrow evening, Dad. This really is an important opportunity that I can't postpone." My phone chimed with a text from the car service indicating their arrival. Through the front window, I could see a sleek black sedan waiting in our driveway, its professional driver standing beside the rear door. "That's my ride," I announced, genuinely excited about the adventure ahead. "Have a wonderful Christmas dinner and give everyone my regards." As I walked toward the door, Linda's voice followed me with mounting desperation. "Marie, you cannot seriously expect us to manage this entire event without any help. What am I supposed to tell Jessica when she realizes you've disappeared?" I paused at the threshold, looking back at my parents with affection despite everything. "Tell her that sometimes the most important opportunities come disguised as inconvenient timing. She'll understand better than you might expect." The car service driver efficiently loaded my luggage while I settled into the leather back seat, watching my childhood home recede through the rear window. I felt a complex mixture of emotions: guilt for abandoning them during their crisis excitement about my business prospects and anticipation for the lessons they were about to learn. My phone rang almost immediately as we merged onto the highway toward O'Hare International Airport. Linda's name flashed on the screen, followed by 3 rapid text messages expressing various degrees of panic and frustration. I turned off my phone and focused on the snowy Illinois landscape passing outside the windows. The car's heated seats and quiet luxury felt like a preview of the lifestyle changes that awaited me in Florida. At the airport, the first-class lounge provided exactly the peaceful environment I needed to review my presentation materials for dinner with Thomas Richardson. I'd prepared comprehensive documentation about my company's growth trajectory, technical specifications for our software platform, and projections for market expansion under Richardson Industries' corporate umbrella. While sipping champagne and reviewing financial spreadsheets, I received a call from an unknown Chicago number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Marie, this is Jessica. Mom is having a complete meltdown and our guests start arriving in 4 hours. Could you at least walk us through the cooking timeline remotely?" The background noise suggested chaos pans clattering Linda's stressed voice, issuing contradictory instructions, and what sounded like the smoke detector beeping intermittently. "Jess, I wrote everything down in detailed instructions. The prime rib needs to go in the oven at exactly 2 p.m. for a 6:30 serving time. Start the appetizers at 4 p.m. and don't forget to chill the white wine." "Marie, none of us actually know how to follow cooking instructions for 24 people. We've never done anything like this before." I felt a pang of sympathy, but also recognition that this was exactly the wake-up call they needed. "You're both intelligent, capable women. Trust yourselves and work together. If something goes wrong, order backup food from one of the restaurants on my emergency list." "But what if Stephanie's father notices that we're serving takeout instead of homemade food?" "Then you'll explain that sometimes life throws unexpected challenges our way, and successful people adapt accordingly." As my flight boarding was announced, I gathered my materials and prepared to disconnect from their crisis. "Jess, I have to go now. Remember that this dinner party is about spending time with friends, not performing for their parents. Focus on enjoying the company instead of achieving perfection." The first-class cabin offered exactly the luxurious comfort I needed to transition mentally from family drama to business opportunity. As Chicago disappeared beneath the clouds, I opened my laptop and began drafting talking points for my meeting with Thomas Richardson. What my family didn't realize was that I was flying toward the most important professional conversation of my career while they struggled with a dinner party that would reveal truths they'd been avoiding for years. The Miami heat felt like a warm embrace after Chicago's brutal winter cold, and my beachfront suite at the Fontainebleau exceeded every luxury standard I'd imagined. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased endless blue ocean views, while the marble bathroom featured a soaking tub large enough for a small party. I'd never experienced hospitality at this level, and it felt like a preview of the lifestyle that successful entrepreneurship could provide. After settling in and confirming my dinner reservation with Thomas Richardson, I decided to check my phone for updates from home. What I discovered was a collection of increasingly frantic text messages that painted a vivid picture of domestic disaster unfolding in real time. Jessica had sent me photos from the kitchen that looked like a war zone. Flour covered every available surface, something dark and smoking was visible in the oven, and Linda appeared in the background, holding a wine glass that was clearly not her first of the afternoon. "Marie, the prime rib is making weird noises, and there's smoke coming from the edges. Also, we accidentally used salt instead of sugar in the dessert, and now it tastes like ocean water. Please call us back immediately." Harold had contributed his own messages describing his failed attempts to set up the dining room properly. "Your mother sent me to buy flowers, but the only place open was a gas station. I got 24 roses, but they all look different colors and sizes. Also, I think I broke one of the good wine glasses while trying to polish them." The most telling message came from Linda herself. "Marie, I need you to come home right now. I don't care what business opportunity you think you have. We are completely overwhelmed and Jessica's friends are starting to arrive early." But the message that made my heart race came from Jessica 2 hours later. "Marie, you're not going to believe this, but I saw your social media posts from the airplane and fancy hotel. Where did you get money for first-class flights and luxury resorts? Mom and Dad think you're lying about having a real business meeting." I deliberately posted a few tasteful photos from my first-class experience and hotel suite, knowing that Jessica's social media habits would eventually lead her to discover them. The timing was perfect because her friends would be arriving just as she realized her unsuccessful older sister was apparently living a lifestyle that exceeded her own college student budget. Around 4 p.m. Miami time, my phone rang with a call from Linda that I decided to answer. "Marie, what is going on? Jessica is showing us pictures of you in some luxury hotel, and now we don't understand anything about this supposed business trip." "I told you I had an important investor meeting, Mom. Just because you've never seen me travel for business doesn't mean my company isn't real." "But where would you get money for expensive flights and hotels? We haven't seen any evidence that your computer activities actually generate income." I laughed softly, enjoying the confusion in her voice. Maybe that's because no one in our family has ever bothered asking about my actual work or achievements. You've been so focused on Jessica's academic success that you never noticed what I was building. "Building, Marie, you sit in your room playing on computers all day. Those computers generate more revenue in a month than Dad's insurance job earns in 6 months. But we can discuss my career details when I return tomorrow. How's the dinner preparation going?" The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if the call had dropped. Finally, Linda spoke in a much quieter voice. "Everything is going wrong. The food is ruined. The house looks terrible, and Jessica's friends are asking questions we can't answer." "What kinds of questions?" "Sophisticated questions about our family, our careers, our involvement in various social and charitable organizations. These young people come from families with country club memberships and vacation homes in the Hamptons. They're polite, but it's obvious they're noticing the differences between their backgrounds and ours." I felt a mixture of sympathy and satisfaction. My parents had spent years chasing social status without recognizing that authentic success comes from genuine accomplishments rather than superficial appearances. "And how is Jessica handling the situation?" "She's trying to maintain her composure, but I can see she's embarrassed. Brandon keeps making excuses about why the dinner timeline is delayed, and several of her friends have offered to help with cooking, which obviously makes us look incompetent." What Linda didn't mention, but I could hear in the background, was the arrival of new guests and the sounds of awkward conversation. Young voices were attempting to make polite small talk, while clearly wondering why their Christmas dinner appeared to be organized by people who had no experience with formal entertaining. "Marie, I'm starting to realize that we may have taken your contributions for granted over the years. I never appreciated how much work goes into managing events like this." It was the first acknowledgement of my value that I'd ever heard from her lips, and it felt both validating and sad. "Mom, I've been handling family gatherings since I was 16 years old. The difference is that tonight you're experiencing the responsibility instead of just enjoying the results. Could you at least give us some guidance about how to salvage this situation? Stephanie Richardson will be arriving soon, and her father is coming to pick her up at 6 p.m. We need everything to appear successful and organized when he sees our home." The irony was almost too delicious to contain. "Tell me about Stephanie. What's she like?" "She's lovely, very sophisticated and well-spoken. She's studying international business and speaks 3 languages fluently. Jessica mentioned that her father owns some kind of major technology company." "Richardson Industries." I confirmed. "It's one of the largest tech conglomerators on the West Coast. They specialize in acquiring promising startups and helping them scale globally." "How do you know that?" "Because I research successful business models as part of my own company development. Thomas Richardson is considered one of the most innovative leaders in the technology sector." "Thomas Richardson, you know his name?" "I know quite a bit about successful entrepreneurs, Mom. It's part of staying informed about industry trends and potential partnership opportunities. What I didn't tell her was that in exactly 3 hours, I would be sitting across from Thomas Richardson at one of Miami's finest restaurants discussing the acquisition of my company and my future role in his organization. The conversation ended with Linda promising to update me about the evening's developments. As I prepared for my business dinner, I reflected on how dramatically my family's perception of me was about to change once they discovered the truth about my professional relationships. Thomas Richardson arrived at our family home at precisely 6 p.m., just as Linda had specified, driving a modest Tesla Model S that belied his billionaire status. According to the text updates Jessica had been sending me throughout the evening, his understated arrival had caught my parents completely off guard. They'd apparently expected someone of his wealth to arrive with an entourage or in some kind of ostentatious luxury vehicle. I was getting ready for our dinner meeting at Joe's Stone Crab, one of Miami's most exclusive restaurants, when my phone erupted with calls from home. The first came from Jessica, speaking in hushed tones from what sounded like a bathroom or closet. "Marie, this is a complete disaster." Mom tried to impress Mr. Richardson by bragging about our family's educational achievements, but he seemed more interested in asking about you. When she mentioned that you were the disappointing daughter who never amounted to anything, his whole expression changed. "What did he say?" "He asked very specific questions about your work and your business activities. Mom kept emphasizing that you were just playing around with computers and hadn't achieved any real professional success. Dad tried to change the subject by pitching his insurance services, but Mr. Richardson looked genuinely uncomfortable with the whole conversation." I could hear party sounds in the background, along with Linda's voice attempting to facilitate introductions between Harold and various college students who clearly had no interest in insurance discussions. "How did Stephanie react to your parents talking about me that way?" "That's the weird part. Stephanie defended you really strongly. She said she'd heard wonderful things about your intelligence and business acumen from her classmates, and she seemed surprised by the way Mom and Dad were describing you." This was interesting news since I'd never actually met Stephanie personally. Jessica must have mentioned me in previous conversations, though, apparently in a much more positive light than our parents typically used. What wonderful things had she heard? "I don't know, but she specifically mentioned that you seemed like a brilliant entrepreneur with innovative ideas. When Mom laughed and said you'd never successfully launched anything, Stephanie looked really confused and uncomfortable." My phone buzzed with an incoming call from Linda, which I declined in order to continue hearing Jessica's account of the unfolding drama. "Marie, there's something else." Mr. Richardson asked Dad about his business goals and whether he'd ever considered expanding into commercial insurance for technology companies. Dad got really excited and started explaining his plans, but then Mr. Richardson said something that made no sense. "What did he say?" "He said that he understood our family had connections to the technology industry through your professional activities." When Dad looked confused, Mr. Richardson asked whether you'd mentioned your recent business developments to the family. I nearly dropped my phone. Thomas was clearly testing my family's knowledge of our professional relationship and discovering that they knew absolutely nothing about my actual career achievements. How did Dad respond? He admitted that he didn't really understand what your business involved, but that he assumed it couldn't be very significant since you'd moved back home and weren't contributing financially to household expenses. The irony was staggering. My father was complaining about my lack of financial contributions to a man who was about to make me independently wealthy through the largest business deal of my career. Jessica, did Mr. Richardson say anything else about my work? He mentioned that the technology industry is always looking for talented young entrepreneurs with innovative approaches to complex problems. He said that family support can make a huge difference in determining whether promising individuals achieve their full potential. That comment must have landed like a slap across my parents' faces, though I doubted they possessed enough self-awareness to recognize the criticism embedded in his observation. Linda's voice became audible in the background, and Jessica whispered that she needed to return to the party before her absence was noticed. Marie, please tell me what's really going on. Nothing about tonight makes sense, and I feel like everyone knows something that our family doesn't understand. After hanging up, I received a text message from Thomas confirming our dinner reservation and mentioning how much he was looking forward to our conversation. He also included a brief note. Interesting meeting your family this evening. Looking forward to hearing your perspective on tonight's developments. I arrived at Joe's Stone Crab wearing a navy blue dress that projected professional confidence without appearing overly formal. The restaurant's legendary ambiance lived up to its reputation with white tablecloths, impeccable service, and an atmosphere that facilitated serious business conversations. Thomas was already seated at our reserved table, reviewing documents on his tablet, while sipping what appeared to be a very expensive scotch. He stood to greet me with the kind of firm handshake that conveyed respect between business equals. Marie, thank you for making time during the holidays. I hope you don't mind, but I have to share an interesting coincidence from earlier this evening. Oh, really? What happened? I had the opportunity to meet your family when I picked up my daughter Stephanie from their Christmas dinner party. It was quite an illuminating experience. I maintained neutral expression while my heart raced with anticipation. I hope they made a good impression. They certainly made an impression, Thomas replied diplomatically. Your parents seem to have some misperceptions about your professional accomplishments. When I asked about your business activities, they described you as someone who plays around with computers but hasn't achieved any meaningful success. That's unfortunately typical. My family has never really understood or supported my entrepreneurial activities. Marie, I've reviewed your company's financial records, technical documentation, and growth projections. Your inventory management platform represents exactly the kind of innovative thinking that drives industry advancement. The fact that you built this from scratch while living at home makes your achievements even more impressive. He leaned forward slightly, his expression growing more serious. What concerns me is that your own family doesn't recognize your talents or accomplishments. That suggests either a profound lack of communication or a deliberate choice to diminish your contributions. Both, actually. I've learned to keep my business activities private because discussing them typically leads to skepticism or dismissive comments about my unrealistic ambitions. Unrealistic ambitions, Thomas repeated thoughtfully. Marie, your company is about to be acquired for $8 million, and you're being offered a senior executive position with one of the most respected technology firms on the West Coast. There's nothing unrealistic about achieving that level of success before your 30th birthday. The waiter arrived to take our dinner orders, providing a brief pause in our conversation. I ordered the restaurant's famous stone crab claws, while Thomas selected the lobster thermidor. The wine he chose cost more per bottle than most people spend on groceries in a month. I have a proposition that might interest you, Thomas continued after the waiter departed. Based on our conversations and my review of your work, I'd like to accelerate our timeline and increase your position within our organization. What did you have in mind? Instead of Director of Innovation, I'm prepared to offer you the role of Vice President of Strategic Development. This would put you in charge of identifying and integrating future acquisitions with a starting salary that reflects the senior nature of the position. The numbers he quoted made my head spin. Between the acquisition payment and my new salary, I would earn more in my first year than my parents had made combined during their entire careers. There's one condition, Thomas added with a slight smile. I'd like you to consider relocating to our California headquarters. Based on tonight's observations, I think some distance from your current family dynamics might be beneficial for your personal and professional development. As we discussed the details of this incredible opportunity, my phone buzzed constantly with messages from home. The Christmas dinner party was apparently continuing its descent into chaos, while my parents remained completely unaware that their guest of honor was simultaneously offering me the career opportunity of a lifetime. The irony was so perfect that I almost felt sorry for them. Almost. I returned to Chicago on Christmas evening, feeling like a completely different person than the one who'd left 24 hours earlier. The first-class flight had given me time to review the formal contract Thomas Richardson's legal team had emailed during our dinner, outlining terms that exceeded my most optimistic expectations. The acquisition was finalized, my new position as Vice President of Strategic Development was confirmed, and I'd accepted his offer to relocate to Richardson Industries' California headquarters, with a relocation package that included temporary housing and a company car. My Uber pulled into the driveway behind Harold's sensible Honda Accord and Jessica's aging Jeep Cherokee, both looking modest compared to the luxury vehicles I'd seen throughout my Miami experience. The house appeared normal from the outside, but I could see through the windows that the interior still showed signs of the previous evening's chaos. Linda opened the front door before I could retrieve my keys, her expression cycling through relief, anxiety, and something that might have been newfound respect. She'd clearly spent considerable time thinking about our recent conversations and the implications of my mysterious business trip. "Marie, we need to talk. Yesterday evening was eye-opening in ways I never expected." I wheeled my suitcase into the living room where Jessica and Harold were sitting on the couch, surrounded by leftover party supplies and what appeared to be several empty wine bottles. Both looked emotionally exhausted in the way that comes from experiencing repeated social mortification. "How did the dinner party conclude?" I asked, settling into my favorite armchair with genuine curiosity about their adventures in event management. "It was a disaster," Jessica admitted immediately. "Everything that could go wrong did go wrong, and Mr. Richardson witnessed most of it." Harold nodded miserably. I've never felt so unprepared and out of my depth. Those young people were polite, but it was obvious they come from a completely different social and economic background than ours. "Tell me about your conversation with Thomas Richardson." Linda and Harold exchanged glances that suggested they'd spent considerable time discussing this topic. "Marie, he asked very specific questions about your work and business activities. When we admitted that we didn't really understand what you do or whether you've achieved any professional success, he looked genuinely surprised." "Surprised how?" "Like he couldn't believe we didn't know basic information about our own daughter's career," Jessica explained. "Stephanie had mentioned that you seemed incredibly intelligent and accomplished, but when Mom and Dad described you as an unsuccessful college dropout, Mr. Richardson's whole demeanor changed." I could imagine how that conversation had unfolded given Thomas's strong opinions about family support and recognition of individual achievements. "What else did he say?" "He mentioned that the technology industry values innovation and entrepreneurial thinking," Harold continued. "He seemed to suggest that you might have more business potential than we'd recognized." "He also said that family support can make the difference between success and failure for promising entrepreneurs," Linda added quietly. It felt like he was criticizing our approach to your career development. The silence stretched uncomfortably as we all contemplated the implications of that observation. Finally, Jessica spoke up with uncharacteristic vulnerability. "Marie, I owe you an apology. I've enjoyed being the family success story while you handled all the practical responsibilities. Yesterday made me realize how much I've taken your contributions for granted." "What do you mean?" "Bon, Watching Mom and Dad struggle with basic party planning made me understand how much work you've been doing behind the scenes for years. I never appreciated that you were managing complex logistics while I focused on my studies and social life. Linda nodded, her eyes beginning to well with tears. Marie, I need to ask your forgiveness for years of dismissive comments about your abilities and potential. Yesterday proved that I don't understand anything about event management business operations or what it takes to achieve real success. Mom, you don't need to apologize for having different priorities and interests. Yes, I do. I've been so focused on Jessica's academic achievements that I completely ignored your entrepreneurial development. I made assumptions about your worth based on traditional measurements that clearly don't apply to your situation. Harold cleared his throat nervously. Marie, I'd like to understand more about your actual business activities. Mr. Richardson implied that you might have professional connections or opportunities that we haven't recognized. This was the moment I'd been anticipating since my departure yesterday morning. I pulled out my phone and opened the email containing my signed contract with Richardson Industries. Dad, you mentioned wanting to expand into commercial insurance for technology companies. Is that still a goal? Of course, but I don't have the industry connections necessary to break into that market. What if I told you that I've just accepted a senior executive position with one of the largest technology firms on the West Coast? The silence was immediate and complete. Linda, Harold, and Jessica all stared at me with expressions of complete bewilderment. Marie, what are you talking about? Linda asked in a whisper. Yesterday's business meeting was with Thomas Richardson, CEO of Richardson Industries. We finalized the acquisition of my company for $8 million, and I've accepted a position as Vice President of Strategic Development with a starting salary that will make me financially independent. Jessica's mouth fell open. You mean the same Mr. Richardson who was here yesterday evening asking about your business activities? The same man who listened to you describe me as a disappointing failure while simultaneously preparing to make me wealthy beyond anything our family has ever imagined. Harold's face had gone completely pale. Marie, are you saying that while we were struggling to impress this man for potential business connections, he was already planning to become your business partner? Not partner, boss. Though he's indicated that my role will include significant autonomy and decision-making authority. Linda sank into the nearest chair, her hands shaking slightly. Oh my God! Marie, what have we done? You treated me exactly the way you've always treated me. The difference is that yesterday your guest of honor witnessed that treatment and formed his own opinions about our family dynamics. I showed them the contract details on my phone, including the acquisition amount and my new salary figures. The numbers were large enough that Jessica actually gasped audibly. Marie, I'm so sorry, she said, tears beginning to flow down her cheeks. I had no idea you'd achieved this level of success. Why didn't you tell us about your business developments? Because every time I've tried to discuss my work, someone in this family has made dismissive comments about my unrealistic ambitions or lack of practical achievements. But $8 million? Harold struggled to process the magnitude. Marie, that's more money than I'll earn during my entire career. And it's just the beginning. Thomas has indicated that Richardson Industries plans to expand aggressively into new markets, and my role will be identifying and developing those opportunities. Linda looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. Marie, can you ever forgive us for not seeing your worth? We've been terrible parents to you while claiming to support our family's success. Mom, forgiveness isn't really the issue. The issue is that we need to rebuild our relationships based on mutual respect, instead of assumptions about each other's value. How do we do that? By starting with honest conversations about who we actually are instead of who we think we should be. The next several hours involved the most authentic family discussion we'd ever experienced. Jessica talked about the pressure she felt to justify their investment in her education. Harold admitted his insecurities about professional advancement, and Linda acknowledged that her social status anxieties had prevented her from appreciating non-traditional paths to success. For the first time in years, I felt like they were seeing me as a complete person rather than a disappointment or domestic convenience. 6 months later, I was standing in the executive conference room of Richardson Industries' Palo Alto headquarters, presenting quarterly acquisition targets to the company's board of directors. My role as Vice President of Strategic Development had exceeded everyone's expectations, including my own, as I'd successfully identified and integrated 4 promising startups into our corporate portfolio. The California lifestyle suited me perfectly. My Menlo Park apartment offered stunning views of San Francisco Bay, while my daily commute through Silicon Valley reminded me constantly that I was working at the epicenter of global innovation. Thomas Richardson had become both a mentor and advocate, providing opportunities for professional growth that I'd never imagined possible. But the most significant changes had occurred within my family relationships back in Chicago. Linda and Harold had undergone what could only be described as a complete transformation in their approach to parenting and personal priorities. The shock of discovering my professional success had forced them to examine their own assumptions about achievement worth and family support. Linda had enrolled in business courses at the local community college, determined to understand entrepreneurship and technology industry dynamics. Her newfound knowledge allowed us to have substantive conversations about my work for the first time in our relationship. She'd also started volunteering with a nonprofit organization that mentored young women pursuing non-traditional careers. Harold had taken my offer to introduce him to Richardson Industries' insurance procurement team, but approached those connections with humility rather than desperate networking. His willingness to learn about technology sector needs rather than simply pitching his existing services had resulted in several successful commercial accounts. Jessica had made the most dramatic changes of all. Witnessing my success and our parents' subsequent self-reflection had prompted her to examine her own motivations and goals. She'd shifted her MBA focus toward social entrepreneurship, inspired by the realization that meaningful achievement comes from creating value rather than seeking status. Her relationship with Brandon had ended amicably when she'd recognized that their connection was based more on mutual social climbing than genuine compatibility. She'd started dating someone she'd met through volunteer work, a teacher whose commitment to education reform aligned with her evolving values. Most importantly, our family had established new traditions based on authentic connection rather than superficial appearances. We scheduled monthly video calls where everyone shared genuine updates about their work challenges and personal growth. These conversations felt completely different from our previous interactions, characterized by curiosity rather than judgment. During my most recent visit home, Linda had prepared dinner with Jessica's help, while Harold and I discussed potential business collaborations. The atmosphere was relaxed and supportive, with everyone contributing according to their abilities rather than predetermined family roles. Marie, I want you to know how proud we are of your achievements, Linda had said during our last family dinner. But more than that, we're grateful for the patience you showed while we learned to see you clearly. And I'm grateful that you were willing to change and grow, I'd replied. Not every family would have had the courage to acknowledge their mistakes and commit to doing better. Jessica had nodded thoughtfully. I think yesterday's Marie would be amazed by today's version of our family. We're all different people than we were 6 months ago. The transformation hadn't been without challenges. Breaking patterns that had developed over decades required constant mindfulness and occasional difficult conversations. But the foundation of genuine love and shared history had provided enough strength to support our evolution. Thomas Richardson occasionally asked about my family during our business meetings, expressing satisfaction that our relationships had improved. He'd mentioned several times that family support or lack thereof could significantly impact executive performance, and he was pleased that I'd found resolution rather than ongoing conflict. Leadership requires emotional intelligence and interpersonal skills, he'd explained during one of our quarterly reviews. Executives who've learned to navigate complex family dynamics often excel at managing corporate relationships and building collaborative teams. My success at Richardson Industries had opened doors to opportunities I'd never considered. I'd been invited to speak at conferences about technology entrepreneurship, interviewed for business magazines, about innovation strategies, and approached by venture capital firms interested in my insights about emerging market trends. But the most meaningful achievement was the knowledge that my family now saw me as a complete person worthy of respect and support. The little girl who'd always felt invisible in her own home had grown into a woman whose voice was heard and valued by both her loved ones and her professional colleagues. As I stood before Richardson Industries board members presenting my recommendations for next quarter's acquisition strategy, I reflected on the journey that had brought me to this moment. The Christmas Eve departure that had seemed like an act of rebellion had actually been an act of self-preservation and self-respect. Sometimes the people we love most need dramatic wake-up calls to recognize our true worth. Sometimes, establishing boundaries creates space for relationships to evolve in healthier directions. And sometimes the greatest gift we can give our families is the example of pursuing our own authentic success, rather than conforming to their limited expectations. The board approved my acquisition recommendations unanimously, and Thomas Richardson smiled with obvious pride in my presentation. As I gathered my materials and prepared to return to my office, I felt the deep satisfaction that comes from knowing you've honored both your professional responsibilities and your personal values. That evening, I called my parents to share news about my latest business achievements. Linda answered with genuine excitement, asking detailed questions about the companies I'd recommended for acquisition. Harold wanted to understand the decision-making process and industry factors that influenced my recommendations. Jessica sent a text expressing pride in my continued success and sharing updates about her own academic projects. The conversation felt natural and supportive, filled with the kind of mutual interest and respect that I'd always hoped to share with my family. We were no longer playing predetermined roles or trying to impress each other with superficial accomplishments. Instead, we were simply people who loved each other enough to grow beyond our original limitations. As I hung up the phone and looked out at the twinkling lights of Silicon Valley, I smiled with contentment. The journey from invisible family disappointment to respected technology executive had taught me that authentic success requires both professional achievement and personal boundaries. But the most important lesson was that real family love grows stronger when everyone is free to pursue their individual potential rather than conforming to others' narrow definitions of worth. Have you ever felt invisible or undervalued by people who should have supported your dreams? Sometimes, our biggest breakthroughs come when we stop seeking approval and start pursuing our authentic goals. I'd love to hear about your experiences with family dynamics and professional growth in the comments below. Please like this story if it resonated with your own journey. Subscribe for more stories about overcoming family challenges, and share this with anyone who might need encouragement to pursue their own path. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you the courage to recognize your own worth, even when others can't see it yet.